Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, and welcome to the latest event in my series, Ask an Atheist. Actually, I'm thinking of renaming it. Maybe Free Thought Hour or something like that. Anyway, we'll wait and see what happens about that. Tonight, I have a very interesting guest. I'm very pleased to announce that with me is ex-pastor Tim Sledge.
Hello, gentlemen.
How the devil are you, Tim?
I'm doing quite well here in Texas. Nice warm day.
Yeah, great.
How about yourself?
Well, yeah, I'm okay, thank you. It's not daytime really here, despite my bogus window. That's just a green screen view. It's evening here, and although the sun isn't set yet, because of course it's coming up to the longest day, it's getting a bit darker. What do we call it? Dusk, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, you are an interesting guy. For a start, you've written a book, Goodbye, Jesus. Now, that title tells us something, doesn't it? You've obviously had an interesting journey. Would you like to take us through it? You know, can you walk us through? I know you were born at a very early age, and you were probably born an atheist. But what happened next?
Well, yeah, I was born in Austin, Texas, the capital of Texas, and moved around a lot and ended up in a little town called Snyder, Texas, where in a Baptist church, when I was 9 years old, I walked the aisle and gave my life to Jesus. I did that because everybody in my family said that's what I should do.
Yeah.
And my Sunday school teacher, Mr. Reed, said that it's what I should do.
Yeah.
He talked about hell. I don't know it was so much about being afraid of hell, because I mean, really all you had to do was just, make the decision and you're good to go. No fear of hell then. But that was in the background. But I think it was more about being a good boy, really. I mean, I tried to do what, my parents told me to do.
Yes.
And then when I was 16 in another West Texas town, Odessa, here in the USA, people have heard of Odessa. It's the home of the Friday Night Lights movie, TV show.
Yeah.
Big football town. That's where I went to high school. And when I was 16, again, I walked the aisle, this time during a revival service, to tell my congregation that I felt God was calling me to preach.
Whoa.
And I started preaching. I think it was just a few weeks later, I preached my first sermon. And then, wow, before I knew it, I was preaching somewhere in some West Texas church almost every week. And then not long after that, I was elected president of my student body at Permian High School.
Mm-hmm.
And my life I had a great second half of high school because everything was going my way. And in West Texas, being a teenage preacher is, I guess today it might make you seem kind of weird, but back in those days, I was kind of a little bit of a celebrity in my little corner of the world there.
Yeah.
And so I I ended up at Wheaton College in Wheaton, Illinois, outside of Chicago, where Billy Graham went to school. That's why I went there, because that was his alma mater. And had some great professors there, and not just in religion, but in other areas as well. And then I came back to Texas to Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, where I did 3 years of study on my master's degree and then a Doctor of Ministry degree, and went to my first church in a suburb of New York City, Waldwick, New Jersey, just about 17 miles from the George Washington Bridge across the Hudson River into Manhattan. So right off the bat, it didn't really start. I did a lot of preaching and youth stuff, youth revivals, and a little part-time church in college and seminary. And so a phenomenon that I call exceptions to the rule of faith started happening very quickly. And an exception to the rule of faith, you've got this whole scheme of how this thing works. Somebody gives their life to Jesus, and the New Testament says you become a new creation. The old has passed away. Behold, all things have become new. And
born again?
Go ahead.
Born again?
Born again. So that's what you think is going to happen. And one of the first things when I did a summer youth revival, there was some guy that walked the aisle, and he was a teenager, young adult. And everybody was like, wow, I can't believe this guy is coming forward. And I went back to the same church a year later, and I don't remember his name, but where's Joe? And they said, who? The guy that had that dramatic conversion last summer. Joe. Oh yeah, he came a couple of weeks and then we never saw him again. And I'm like, really? I mean, his conversion was so dramatic and so real. So this kind of experience kept happening. Didn't matter where I went. Later, I ended up in a church in Arizona. Then I came back to a church in Houston that under my leadership in 10 years, it went from 500 members to 2,000 members, started a ministry that got us on the map nationally, got a lot of attention nationally in our denomination. And, but I was still seeing these, like my book, Goodbye Jesus, opens with the story of a funeral I was leading in Katy, Texas. And it was the funeral of a middle school teacher who'd walked in front of an 18-wheeler and taken his own life because he had just been confronted at his school for sexually molesting one of his students. And what I don't know if they know, what I learned from the girl later was that while he was in this relationship with her in which he was sexually molesting her, hold on to your seats, he was also trying to lead her to faith in Jesus. So that was a pretty challenging funeral that I did for him. So I just kept seeing these things, but I'd always like, well, I just need to learn more. I need to get more experience. I need to understand the Bible better. I need to understand spirituality better. And a little more time and all this stuff is going to make sense. But instead, what happened is, like, first it was a little compartment in my head, and it was like then I needed a bigger room, and then I needed several rooms. So I'm carrying around all this stuff. And eventually, and one thing that started happening near the end of my ministry was I started a support group ministry for people who'd grown up in dysfunctional families. And we did these groups. They lasted 12 weeks. And in the group, basically what we did is everybody was really honest. We talked about our fears, our pain, and our struggles, and we encouraged each other. We did pray at the beginning, and there were scriptures that they read during the week. But really, looking back on it, what was making it work was the people and the support and the honesty.
Yes.
Well, what was interesting, John, is that
sounds a bit like Alcohol Anonymous.
Yeah, I got the idea. I actually went to a treatment center for 5 days. They had a program for ministers. They wanted ministers to learn what they were doing, so the ministers would refer people to them. And I ended up actually in a therapy group as, quote, an observer, but quickly realized my father had been an alcoholic. Yes. And I quickly realized that I had some stuff I could work on as the child of an alcoholic. So yes. That was a life-changing experience for me. I'd majored in pastoral care and actually done my doctoral work around a small group concept. And so I just went back home and started doing these groups. And you're right, it was right out of the 12-step model.
Yes.
And so what happened was people started coming from all over Houston, from all denominations. And these groups were really helping people change. And I was really excited about that, and I wrote a book called Making Peace with Your Past, which was the guide that you would use when you were going through the group. It over the years has sold over 200,000 copies and has been used in probably at least 20,000 support groups across the U.S., South America, and South Korea. But as I watched these groups, there was a troubling aspect about it, and that was that I saw more consistent, dramatic, positive change in the lives of the people who did these groups than I saw from guys like going back to that youth revival decades earlier who walked the aisle and gave their life. In fact, almost everybody in these groups had already given their life to Jesus. And I found that when we gave them permission to talk, that there were so many people in the church who were carrying all this emotional pain around.
Yes.
And they just didn't have permission to talk about it. And once they did, the floodgates came open. So that made me happy, but it also started troubling me. And I think I was, when I started in ministry, really, I just wanted to help people.
Yes. And you were, by the sound of it, you were doing good work. So what puzzles me is, how did you change? What was it that triggered you were just going on to say, because you had this troubling thought. So I've interrupted you. Carry on. I'll put you full screen.
The questions were there. I was carrying those around. The first thing that happened, and I'm almost hesitant to say this because it's so big and powerful that people, no matter what I say after this, you're going to have a tendency to think, well, this is why he stopped believing. And it's not. And I'll explain that in a minute. But the next thing that happened was that after being at the church for 10 years, leading it to quadruple in size, and leading it through multiple building programs, putting us on the map in our denomination as the model for support group ministries across the country, I was forced out of my position by a small group of lay people in the church. And it was very complex, and I'd go into detail on this in my book, Goodbye Jesus, but one of the factors was the support groups. Because you see, this made some people uncomfortable. It made some of the more traditional people uncomfortable because you're just supposed to pray and give your life to Jesus and everything will be fine. So we don't know about, and I think it also made some people uncomfortable because they themselves needed to be doing the same work. And it's very frightening if you've never done it, taking those first steps. So I was forced.
They just wanted to get on with their style of relationship.
More traditional. And the church did go back to being less innovative, more traditional after I left. So, but the important thing here is I did not lose my faith at this point. This was in 1996. And, I said, I'm still a Christian, but I did say, I don't want to be a pastor anymore. If you can work this hard at something and be this good at it and have this happen to you, this is not something I want to keep doing. My book was very successful, so I just said, well, I'm going to keep writing, and I'm doing a lot of traveling, speaking, helping people to organize support groups in churches across the country. I'm going to keep doing that.
At that point, you were more of a care worker than a priest.
Yeah, there was it moved to that. Now, but my Sunday sermons were very Christian, very spiritual, very biblical. I mean, I was still talking about prayer but the thing where my passion was these groups, because they were so powerful. So I moved into a new stage, and my wife at the time actually was a children's minister, and she found a new job in another church, and I was traveling a lot, speaking on Sundays in different churches, and I ended up starting a business. I got involved with a company called FlashNet when the internet first came out, and they were doing a multi-level marketing, which a lot of people, have bad views of that. But for me, and for a lot of people I knew, it was a real product. We were selling the internet, and the next thing I knew, I I had the largest group of distributors in the company across the United States. And so I was making as much money as I'd made being a pastor. They gave me a new Lexus for 2 years. I was like, wow, this is awesome.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, right. Let me get this clear. Is that a pyramid scheme? Multi-level marketing?
Well, the people who do it don't like to call it that.
No.
But yeah,
No.
that's what it's referred to frequently. But
Yes, yes.
in this one, I really was very concerned about the ethics of whatever I did.
Yes.
And this was a real product. We weren't selling a vitamin that we said would do miraculous things. We were selling dial-up internet, and we had the cheapest price on the market. So to me, it felt like a real thing. And I actually saw people making some pretty good money getting their friends and family signed up for the internet.
Yes.
But at the same time, and this was kind of a leap, but I started, I taught myself how to write database software back while I was a pastor, just sort of as a hobby.
Yes.
And I designed this, what I call smart church software. And the company that serviced our computers at our church knew that, and they knew what I was doing. So they started asking me to write softwares for some of their clients in Houston. So out of that, I started my own software business, developing custom business software, which is something that I still do. And that's the main way I've made my living since.
Yes. So what software language, what programming language were you using?
I write in a Visual Basic, ASP.NET, and SQL Server, T-SQL, the language that's used to communicate with SQL Server databases.
Yeah.
And I write business applications, law firms, all kinds of accounting firms, all kinds of things like that.
Well, you're lucky, aren't you? Because a lot of priests and preachers and pastors who lose their faith, and we could talk about what that phrase means a bit later. They don't have anywhere to go. They've only got the one skill, and if they reject that, what can they do to earn a living? But you had a more comfortable journey out.
Yeah, and the one thing the church did for me, they paid me for 10 months after I left, and that gave me a transition time.
Yes.
And I have to credit my dad, who, though he had his problems with alcohol through different periods in his life, also was a great dad in many ways. And he always taught me to think positive about what I could do. So when I left the pastorate, I saw it as an opportunity. I just thought, well, I can do whatever I want to do. And so that positive attitude served me well. But I'm not minimizing. I was lucky.
Well, you had other talents.
And so I'm certainly not minimizing the trauma and the tremendous struggles that so many ministers face when they leave, and I really empathize with that. I was just very fortunate.
Yes, you work now for the Clergy Project, don't you?
Actually, I don't. I'm very supportive of it, and I think it's a great organization. Tomorrow, the Conference on Religious Trauma is going on this week, coming out of Canada with speakers from all over the place.
Yes, and
I'll be participating in an ex-ministers panel led by Dan Barker, who is the head of that organization. So
he's a lovely guy. He is.
Yeah, great guy. And
again, multi-talented, musical right. As well. Yes.
Yeah, I was just listening to one of his presentation from court earlier in the week last night, and he ended up with a song that he did. It's very good.
Yes.
So so for me, I was doing all this stuff, and so now we're at about about 6 years after leaving the pastorate. I left my marriage, and I talk about this in a good bit of detail in the book.
Yes,
there are other people involved, and so I want to keep it real simple right here. But I'm not trying to cover up anything. You can read about it in the book. It's pretty much laid out there to read. But so I found myself for the first time in my life. Now, I was one of those broken people that I always reached out to. And at my last church, one of our slogans was, "We're a healing place for hurting people." Yes. And now I was a hurting person. I was the one who had violated, and in our view, you're just not supposed to get a divorce. And certainly if you're a minister, you're not.
Yes.
So I was the bad guy, and I was the guy who was hurting, and now I was the guy who needed a church. And I'd moved to
Yes.
another city, and I
Yes.
started looking for churches. And all I wanted was a church where I could find a spiritual home, a church where
Yes.
I could sort of get back to what I considered my spiritual healthy state that I'd been in, but seemed to have lost some of it at least. And as I visited churches, first I went to Baptist churches, and without
Naturally.
going into the detail, it just soon became apparent that, well, for one thing, because I was pretty well known, when I walked into a smaller church, the minister was probably kind of threatened by me on several counts. One was, I was well known, so what if I do get back in the saddle, so to speak? Will I be a threat to him?
Yes.
And the other was, I was a fallen warrior, so to speak.
Yes.
And ministers, are trying, and I'm not putting them down, but they're trying to stay pure and clean. So they're trying to stay away from people who would make them look, bad.
They wouldn't want to be associated with the life of you.
Right.
What at that stage of your life?
Oh, that was a new experience for me, but I kept going to churches, and I just kept having these and I went, and finally I went to a Unitarian church. And for anybody that knows about the range of Christian denominations, for a Baptist minister to go to a Unitarian church, that tells you something. I am down at the end of my list. I will try anything.
Yes. Yes.
And finally, one day, after going to one more church and feeling like, because it was very painful to get your hopes up and then it just didn't work, I just said, why am I doing this to myself? I feel bad. For 2 days after Sunday, I'm not going to look for a church anymore. I've been to 20 or 30 different kinds. I'm through looking. And once I did that, it was like a lock was taken off my thought process. And I began to think more freely about things that bothered me. The first issue was, do I really think, as I had believed and preached as a Baptist minister, that gay people simply choose to be gay? Do I really think that? Because I'd worked with somebody in Flashnet who was gay and had had a lot of conversations with her that were very revealing and helpful. I had friends who had children who were gay that I'd known them since they were little. And so about the first thing I said was, well, no, I don't think people choose to be gay. I didn't choose to be heterosexual. They just are.
Well, exactly. And gay people are not demons either, are they?
Exactly. And one of the great things about my experience of moving into this world of the non-believers is some of my makes me emotional. Some of my good friends now are gay.
Yes.
And it's something that I don't really, certainly we're aware of everything about a friend, but it doesn't matter. I don't care. It's just they're friends,
Yes.
And I like that. I like that new way of doing life.
Let me tell you a little story about an encounter that I had some years ago, because I was attending a party at which there were some gay men. I knew that they were my colleagues and friends, some of them, but one of them wasn't. He was the partner of one of my colleagues. And so we were having a conversation. And he said to me, aren't you embarrassed, or don't you feel difficult about talking to a gay man? I said, we're only talking. And it just seemed odd that people should bring up in, secular conversation, ordinary, non-sexual conversation, the fact of their sexuality. What's that got to do with the price of fish,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that was a big step. And then the next thing was, do I really believe that people who don't place their faith in Jesus are going to be tortured forever in hell? Now, understand, I'm still a Christian, But
Yes.
do I think that anymore? No, I don't. That's crazy. I mean, really, God is love, and he makes somebody burn forever.
Yes.
Are
Yes.
you really? No, I don't believe that anymore. So now I've started thinking more freely,
Yes.
and I've moved away from these two beliefs that
Yeah.
were just really troublesome. And
Bricks falling
then
out of your wall.
now the gates are open, and I start looking at other things.
Yes.
And so the next logical step for an evangelical like me was, well, okay, but the Bible clearly says that homosexuality is wrong, and it clearly says that non-believers are going to hell, and I don't believe those things anymore, and that means I don't think the Bible always tells the truth anymore.
Yes.
And so now I'm looking at the Bible differently.
Yes. Yes.
And
Once you do that, once people start looking at their Bible critically, that it's a good recruiting agent for non-belief.
yeah. So all of this that I'm talking about now is occurring 11 years after leaving the church in 1996. So, being forced out was painful. I learned a lot from it, but didn't make me lose my faith. It was 11 years later.
Yes. Yes.
Before those things that I just described happened. Yes. And
Gradual process.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So that was around 2007. I talked to people I was close to about it, not everybody, but a few people, but I was pretty much quiet about it. And then I found out when I did meet new people, and I said, they said, well, what do you do? And I said, well, I actually have a doctorate in theology, and I used to be a minister, but now I don't even go to church anymore. And most of the time they'd say, wow, tell me about what's your story? And so that made me think, okay, maybe I've got a good story here. So in 2018, I wrote and published Goodbye, Jesus, which I call my spiritual autobiography. And I really, one of the things I feel good about in that book is, if you're not really familiar with Baptist or evangelical Christians, and you read that book, it's like you will learn what it feels like to be in that world. You learn a lot about how we think. Yes. And I think you also learn that, and a lot of times online, not free thinkers, atheists, agnostics, I'm part of this group, but some people in our group say all religious people are crazy. All preachers are just in it for the money. Blah, blah, blah. No. Yeah, a lot of televangelists are, like, maybe narcissistic sociopaths, for all I know.
Yep.
But most pastors I knew were pretty good guys, and they were sincere. Genuine. A lot of good people in the church, a lot of good things on any given week in a community where there are churches, there are people helping each other. Yes. There are people expressing concern for each other. So, sorry, I'm an atheist, but I cannot honestly say that everything that happens in churches is bad, and that every leader of the church has bad intentions. I think most of them have good intentions.
Yes, indeed. I'm interested in your search for a suitable home in a church, in some denomination or other, and how you ended up at the Unitarians, and probably the next stop was going to be the Society of Friends. What do they call themselves?
The Quakers.
Yeah, the Quakers. Yeah. So that's very much a sort of stepping stone way out of religion, isn't it? It's not like a revelation on the road to Damascus in reverse, is it?
Yeah, no.
There are some people who do get a sort of sudden overnight conversion out of their faith, but not you.
I looked at liberal Christianity. I mean, I was very familiar with liberal Christianity from friends and experiences through the years. But the thing that troubled me about it was, so the way it works is, and this is also true, I think, of progressive Christianity today, something that used to be dogma, you got to believe this to be one of us, gets thrown out the window. Well, no, we don't believe that anymore. No, yeah, the part about gay people, that doesn't apply anymore, which I like the outcome of it. But the concept, okay, you just turned off part of your holy book.
Yes.
And now you turn off another part and another
Yes.
part. So the way I say it in Goodbye Jesus is, it looked like to me, if I got on this journey, I was taking one step at a time down to a basement where there was nothing in it.
Yes, yes.
And that seemed like a waste of time to me. Now, I would say that today, liberal and progressive Christians, in terms of their lifestyle, their political views, and their approach to life, have more in common with me than, I mean, there's a surprising amount in common with them. And they're generally very tolerant people. But I have some liberal Christian friends who've also shunned me since I've left the faith. So, I mean, you know, that can be happening anywhere.
Yes, yes. Well, tolerance is not a property of any group. It's not owned by any group. There are tolerant and intolerant people in all groups.
Here's something that I think is funny. So a lot of times online, like on Twitter, I'll post something, and then so the Christians come out of the woodwork and they say, "Oh, you never really were a Christian."
Yes, yes.
And I almost kind of don't have to say anything, because a lot of the people who follow me on Twitter just do it for me. They say, we're so tired of hearing that. And they tell their story. I did this, and they tell how committed they were. But then what's funny to me, though, is that somebody comes on Twitter and they say, "Yeah, I used to be an atheist, but now I'm a Christian." So the atheists say, "Well, you weren't really a real atheist, were you?"
Yes.
So, I mean, you're right. It does work both directions.
Yes. Here's Dan Stoin. I'm not sure whether I'm saying your name right. Dan, forgive me if I've got it wrong, but thank you for watching us. He says, "Hi, Tim, given you've been a Baptist, do you consider the denomination to be fundamentalist?"
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I think I recognize Dan from Twitter. I think I saw a post from him on Twitter today. Well, that's a good question. Are Baptists fundamentalists? There are gobs of kinds of Baptists. I was a Southern Baptist. That's the largest, last time I checked, Protestant denomination in the United States.
Yes.
I now understand that part of my being forced out was part of a larger movement. The fundamentalists were taking over our seminaries, our institutions, and a group of people in my church, the group that forced me out, I would say they would be probably people who were happy with the state of evangelicalism today, happy with Donald Trump and all of that. And they won. They took over Southern Baptist. So
so you're even less like them than you were like the original.
I would not have been comfortable with today's evangelicals and today's Baptist when I was one of them, and many of my friends would not have been either.
Yes. Can I tell you about a Baptist friend of mine? Because what you're saying there is that baptism has sort of moved away from you rather than the other way around. But this friend of mine, I got to say, probably ex-friend of mine, because you use the word shunned. He shuns me now because it turns out that his mission was to convert me, and I wasn't. I'm a retired science teacher. I'm not easy to convert into a faith. So, but the point I want to make is that his version of baptism was something called Reformed. I can't remember. New Bible, New Reformed. There was a word Reformed was in it, but it's obviously a specific sub-denomination of the major denomination. And this is something which puzzles a lot of people who don't have a faith. Why are there so many? And why do they keep dividing up into more subsects? What's going on?
Well, okay, I have a really simple answer to that. They are, whether they're liberal or conservative, they're based to a large degree on teachings in the Bible.
Yes.
The Bible is a book written by a lot of different people over hundreds of years, who, if we could magically put all those same people in one room together, we would see a fight, because their views are different. The Bible is not a unified book. It says opposing things in different parts of it.
Yes.
And because of that, you have people who, and there are so many kinds of Baptists. Even having been a pastor and gone to Baptist pastor and gone to seminary and all that, I couldn't, you could name a lot of them. I'd say I've never heard of that group. So part of it is that when you're believing, and by the way, I don't want to forget, I'm going to get back to Dan's question because there's another part of it. But there's, so part of it is that you're believing stuff that's made up and it doesn't all agree. So that makes it easy to pull this part, and the God of the universe, who supposedly revealed himself through the acts of the prophets and Jesus coming to the earth and then through the Bible, is a poor communicator, apparently, because there is a lot of confusion. What does the Bible mean about the return of Jesus? What does the Bible mean about predestination? Should you baptize a baby, or should you wait and let them decide? We could go on and on and on. So some of the differences are theological, but then there's a whole other category of differences, and they're sociological, about who feels comfortable worshiping with who else. Like in West Texas, we had the Episcopal Church. That's for the wealthy, more educated people. The Baptists are kind of more in the middle, but down the other end of the spectrum. Charismatics, the Assembly of God, you might feel more comfortable there if you're a little bit lower in the socioeconomic scale. And then there's a psychological component. You go to the charismatic church if you like the, waving your hands in the air and speaking in tongues. If you go to the Episcopal church, you're too dignified to do things like that. So it's about people being people. And
it's more about entertainment than, whether you prefer jazz to rock and roll.
It is a part of it.
Yes.
But to get back to Dan's question, I would say now my former denomination is largely fundamentalist. And you're seeing reactions. One of the most popular women speakers, Beth Moore, is making news lately because she's backing away from their male dominant view of church and religion. So there's some tension there. The second part of Dan's question is, what if I'd have been a Lutheran or a Presbyterian, or we could say a liberal Methodist or an Episcopalian? It's a good question. I can't really answer it. I might still be there. I encountered those views, or I had a friend who was a Methodist.
That's interesting, because if you were in the UK, where I'm based, you'd probably be still a Church of England minister.
Maybe.
Because the Church of England, your Episcopalian branch.
Exactly, yeah.
It's very much Christian light.
Yeah. You do, in fact, this is interesting, you do have a Timothy Sledge, and my name is Timothy Sledge, who is, he may have retired, but was a leader in the Anglican Church there.
Really?
Yeah.
Didn't know.
If you Google my name, you'll see the two of us come up, and I'm the former, and so that was interesting to me. And the Sledges came to America from, there was a Sledge way back when who joined in a rebellion against the king. There were about 3,000 people. About half of them had gotten their heads chopped off. So this guy jumped on a ship in Bristol and came to the U.S. And that's how the Sledges got to the U.S. But so I don't really know. But my whole environment, my family, my parents, they start telling you right off the bat why those Episcopalians, that's not good, because they're not really honoring the Bible. And I had a friend that I believe his father was a Methodist minister. He was really smart, and he would try to explain that, he'd say, well, here's the way we process this as a liberal Methodist. And I just sort of shake my head and say, wait, what did you just say? Because I don't know what you just said.
Yes.
So I guess if I'd been one of those guys.
He meant, when he said process, he meant spin.
Yeah. And I've had that with other Methodist minister, at least one other Methodist minister friend. And I'd say, well, explain how you deal with this. And he talks for 3 minutes, and I'm like, I don't always say this, but it's like, what the heck did you just
Yes.
say? I don't even know what you just said.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people who haven't been to seminary hear
Yes.
that kind of talk.
Yes.
And they
Word
say,
salad.
they say, I don't understand it, but it sounds really good. And so there must be an answer. I'm just not smart enough to understand it. No,
Yes.
that's not the issue. You are smart enough to understand it, and it doesn't make any sense. That's what's
Yes.
happening. So
Exactly.
take it from
Well,
me.
yeah. Well, you said a very interesting thing a few minutes ago when you were talking about your book. You said you had a good narrative. And that is key. In fact, even today in politics, when, as you know, the truth doesn't seem to matter anymore, they talk about, after an election, having won the narrative.
Yeah.
So I regret this as a retired science teacher, because I think what's important is not a story. I mean, Red Riding Hood is a story. What's important is evidence, not narrative. I mean, we all love narrative, and I'm sure your book is a great narration, but it's not evidence. There's something that's different. It's entertainment rather than making a strong case.
And in the last third of my book, that's what I go into, and I start looking at the issues and the evidence. But you've raised an important issue, John, because see, and today the science is so important because it's telling us things that have held humans back from not knowing about bacteria, not knowing about the climate. All these have caused the ignorance in these areas has caused tremendous suffering.
And the propensity of the church to suppress questioning has held us back. I'm going to put up a couple more questions. At
the same time, as humans, we'll never get away. We like stories. I don't think we'll never get away from that. But back to Dan. So to answer your question, yes, if I'd been one of those other denominations, I might still be there. But they never could grab me even early in my life. So I don't know.
Yeah. Well, the reason we like stories is because we live one. Our lives have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So, of course, we're fascinated by that and want to hear other people's stories. So here's another one from, we don't know who this person's name is. Do you flatly condemn religious and homophobic bigotry?
I definitely condemn I condemn any kind of bigotry, but definitely homophobic. Religious bigotry, and a reason I'm waffling or hesitating on that one though is, I condemn religious bigotry as I understand it, but I don't think that if somebody is a Christian here in my city, for example, and their neighbor is not, and they say, "Could I tell you why I'm a Christian?" I can understand they're doing that out of love and concern. And they don't see themselves as arrogant. They don't see themselves as bigots. So it's kind of a sociological issue. I don't want to oversimplify it. But there's religious bigotry. I mean, people are being killed on Twitter. I've had a lot of interesting experiences on Twitter. And I was telling you when we talked yesterday, years or so ago, a bunch of Catholics found some of my tweets, and man, they came after me like a swarm of wasps.
Yes. It's a toxic place, Twitter.
And they were, it's not for the faint-hearted. But they were saying, really, they were ridiculing me, and which I'm pretty tough. I can handle it. But the thing that I've thought about a lot of times since then is this: in a different time, in a different place, in a different culture, as I look at the vitriol behind the comments that I've read, I think that some of those people possibly would be the people in a group that would take somebody like you or me and take us to the stake, to burn us, to hang us, whatever. And so I think we need to all figure out how to live together. We need to figure out how to respect each other, and that you can disagree with somebody and still say, "How are you today? How's your family? Can I help? Can I open the door open for you?" Because we have to live together,
Well, that's right. Absolutely. Well, as a former teacher, one thing you learn the moment you walk into a classroom or a laboratory, as it was in my case, is not to alienate the audience.
Yeah, right.
You want to get on, and it doesn't matter what color, shape, size, creed, or whatever they are. It's a relationship business where you must be respectful in both directions.
Exactly.
I currently live in a household which contains a nominal Muslim and a more than nominal, she would describe herself as still a staunch Christian, although she's no longer practicing, and me. And I class myself not as an atheist, but as a non-believer. So, yes, we've all got to learn to live with each other, and I claim that I'm doing it.
You're doing it up close and personal, it sounds like.
Yes. So here's another one. As a former, this is Dan again. Hello, Dan. As a former pastor, do you now see any sort of theological criticism towards Christianity? Things like the virgin birth and Hebrew Alma. I don't know what the Hebrew Alma is.
Yeah, I don't either, but yeah, definitely yes. And here's the thing. The other day I posted a tweet that said, my leaving faith is like driving away from a town where you used to live, and the farther away you get, the more crazy the town looks to you.
Yes.
Now, I got to be careful with that, because I'm not saying that religious people are crazy. I'm talking about myself.
Yes.
And as I look back at all these things that I believed, and this is 11 years after leaving the faith, this is happening still every week. I think about something. The other day I've been reading a lot. I'm really interested in early hominids, and I love Yuval Noah Harari's book Sapiens. I recommend it to everybody.
Yeah.
I learned a lot about prehistoric humans and different forms of the of hominids.
Yes.
So one of the things and there's so much that's been learned about all this in the last 10, 20 years.
Recently, yes, there's a lot still being discovered.
And one of the things is that a lot of humans have Neanderthal DNA.
Yes.
And there's another kind, I can't remember how to pronounce it. It starts with a D.
Denisovan.
Yeah, a lot of people have their DNA too. Yes. So then I was thinking about Noah and the flood, and I like to get in. So I think the best way to critique something is to get inside its world and show inconsistencies. And so I was thinking about Noah and his family, the ones that survived the flood.
Yes.
Let's pretend that's true. Yes. Well, we have to assume that at least one of those people had some, or two, had that DNA, because that's the only way it could have gotten here if those were the only humans to survive. And then we go back to Adam and Eve and say, okay, were Adam and Eve the first Homo sapiens, or were they
Neanderthals?
Yeah, were they Neanderthals? And if they were Neanderthals, did Jesus coming as a Homo sapien really satisfy the requirement of it says he was tempted in every way as we are. Did he understand how Neanderthals were tempted? Maybe not. Then it says in the garden, it says women will have pain in childbirth. Why? Because you disobeyed God. But science says human babies have big brains, and humans stand on 2 feet. That affects the pelvic girdle, and that makes it harder and painful to have a baby. Not because of what happened in the Garden of Eden. And it says you're cast out of the Garden of Eden, you're going to have to till the soil. Wait a minute. They skipped the whole hunter-gatherer stage, which was huge. So here's my point, and this sort of gibberish I'm sputtering out here, is that once you open your mind and start just treating this like you'd treat it if somebody walked up to you and said, I believe in this so-and-so God from Mars, and here's what we believe. And you'd say, are you kidding me, man?
Yes.
When you get out of the trance.
Yes.
So much of it is like, really, it just starts to fall apart. Now, I know, the liberal side, the liberal Christians say, oh, but Tim, Adam and Eve are just symbolic. Okay.
Yes.
metaphorical, whatever.
Yes.
The author of Communication, the creator of the universe, wanted us to understand how bad behavior got into the world. And that's the story he gave us, even if it's metaphorical. Really? What about we're trying not to be animals?
Yes.
We're evolving from animals that if you got food and I want it, I'll eat you, I'll kill you, whatever.
Yes.
How do you figure out how to do that? I think that's the real story about where our struggle with ethics came from. No mention of it there. Or how about a word about germs somewhere in there, even by the time of Jesus? Jesus said, don't worry about washing your hands. That's just a foolish ritual. Oh my gosh.
He was very keen on washing feet.
Yeah.
So
what was the question? Did I answer it? Yeah, criticize. Yes, the answer is yes. When you look at so many of these things, they just don't hold up. No. They don't hold up. Not for me anyway.
When people are talking about the story of Noah, why do they overlook the fact that their God must have been genocidal? He wanted to kill everyone else.
Well, let me see if I can slip back into my ministerial role. Let me see how I would answer that. Well, John, we're not God. God is God, and we've got to trust some things. When we get to heaven, he's going to explain that to us, and it'll make more sense.
The mysterious
That's all I can say about it. I just know that God loves you and God loves me. And you and I are not in a flood. We're here, and we've got the opportunity to follow God and to love him and to obey him. And that's what I want to be about.
We have a great actor here. What's his name? Rowan Atkinson, who he does something like that. He does a spoof vicar spouting that sort of God moves in mysterious ways sort of nonsense, and it's very funny. Maybe you've got a career possibility there. Here's some more questions.
I saw one a minute ago, John, that what was it? It popped up for a second and went away before this one. I wanted to be sure to answer it.
I'll put them back in. So
no, it was after that one. Yeah. Do you regard your previous Christian beliefs as being irrational? That's a great question. The answer is not simple. So once you get into this mindset, there is a God. He revealed himself through the Bible and certain other things. Within that system, it's very logical. And you spend years learning how to make it all fit.
Yes.
But then when you get out of it and you pull the presuppositions out of it,
yes,
it's not logical. But this is why it's important not to treat believers like they're crazy, because in their framework with the presuppositions that they have accepted, they are operating logically, and often these are people who are drilling oil wells and building great buildings and discovering, doing science and all sorts of things.
Yes.
So to me now, it's irrational, but it makes sense when you're in it.
Do you think that requires a sort of split brain, so that you can think in terms of logic for drilling up for oil in the one half?
Definitely.
In a different compartment, you can think that virgins can give birth.
Yeah, and I think about a guy that was in one of my churches who worked for an oil company, and I believe he was a geologist, and he helped them decide where to drill. And of course, the way he did that, you can't do that without understanding how old the Earth is and how how all these layers developed and everything.
Yes.
So I think so.
Yeah, cognitive dissonance, we would call that. So Carol says, what is the mission of your life after leaving? Do you have a mission? Do we need a
Carol? Hi, Carol. Carol, somebody that has communicated on Twitter, and glad to see you here and wishing you well in your search. So that's a good question. Now, a lot of people say if you don't believe in God, you can't have a purpose. You have no purpose. You might as well go out and murder somebody.
Yes.
And I think it was the Penn and Teller guy, the magician, the big one, the talks. He said, you know what? I murder whoever I want. I rape whoever I want. I don't feel comfortable saying those words very much, but what he's saying is, but you know what? I don't want to rape anybody. I don't want to murder anybody. Ethics,
I find it very insulting, this assumption that because they don't subscribe to their particular God, it doesn't matter about all the other gods. Maybe I subscribe to Uncle and Kalu, hey? Maybe. But
and the thing of it is, so I lost my thought.
Sorry, I took it away from you.
No, that's okay. Well, it's this idea that we evolved. So we're out here on the savannah. There's, I don't know what, all kinds of big animals that want to eat us. We don't naturally have covering that'll keep us warm. We're not as strong as some of these animals. How are we going to stay alive? We've got to help each other.
Yes, it's a communal thing.
Right. Altruism, most likely, in my view, evolved. Yes. It's an evolved trait.
Yes.
And so now when we are altruistic, it feels good to me to be kind, to open the door for somebody, to be kind to a child. That's how I want to live. That didn't change one bit. And I'll tell you, especially my theological education did sharpen my sense of ethics, because it makes you think about.
Yes.
In seminary, I did a whole study on abortion and euthanasia.
Yes.
And you're really interviewing people and thinking about it. But I think when I was a little kid, my aunt, and this wasn't my favorite aunt, she took me to a department store and there was a gumball machine, 1 penny, a round ball of gum. She gave me 2 pennies. I put it in, pull it out, put the gum in my mouth, and I look over and there's there's an African-American kid looking longingly at me getting that gum.
Yes.
So what I did, I didn't even have to think about it. Put the other penny in, pulled it, got the gum, and handed it to him.
Yes.
My aunt pulls me aside, now this is in West Texas, shakes me. Oh, no, don't you ever do that. Be stingy. And I was about 5, and I thought, no, I don't think so.
No.
And that wasn't because I had learned a Bible verse.
Yes.
It was just, I think it's in us.
What Penn Jillette was saying is, it's alarming to think that all of these other people need a book to get their morals from. Yeah. What's wrong with them? Why are they?
So if you're saying that to me and you ever lose your faith, I'm staying away from you because you think you're going to start murdering people.
Yes.
But back to Carol's question, what is the mission of my life after leaving? Well, here's the difference. Rick Warren wrote a wildly successful book, The Purpose-Driven Life. You read it, you figure out, you get to talking to God, and he tells you your purpose. Well, in this life, without belief in any personal God, you get to choose. You get to choose. What do you want your purpose to be? Now, for me, I do my personality test indicate I probably, had I not been a minister, I might have been a psychologist or a therapist or something like that. So I'm a communicator. I want to inspire people. I want to make people, hey, look over here. Isn't that beautiful? Hey, isn't that funny?
Yes.
Or, hey, isn't that something we all need to learn?
Yes.
Which brings us to my purpose is, and I'm actually making a shift. And if we have time, I've got this little thing I'll read about the shift I'm making, is into a more positive vein of communicating the things that I value. I see another question from Carol. What is your compass rather than the Bible? Do
you think the Bible is a good compass, Tim?
It can be, but it all depends on who's telling you what it means. And if you get with the wrong people who are telling you what it means, you may turn into a bad person, a dangerous person. And so it depends on who tells you what it means. But I do see, like in who knows what Jesus actually said, or or did he even really think, as we see in the Gospel of John, that he was God? I'm not sure he did.
No.
But he did say some good things. Now, lately, I've been doing some reading about secular Buddhism. I'm not a Buddhist. I'm not going to become one, but they've got some good ideas about how to handle anger and how to view life. And also Stoicism. And there's actually some common ground between Stoicism and Buddhism. But guess what? Buddha was 500 years before Jesus. And so Jesus is saying some great things, but one of my next things I want to do is go back and look at his ethical teachings and see how many of them can I find that were totally original to him. And I think it was zero.
Yes, I think it's zero too. I think it's theft for Christians to think that they own morality, because it's been about since before man. Many of the animals have empathic feelings towards each other, even between different species. And as a former biology teacher, I could give you lots of examples about that, but this is nearly the end of the show. We've got time for another question from Marina. Thank you for watching, Marina. How did it all start, Tim?
Well, nobody really knows, but I have a kind of a parable in the book Goodbye Jesus about this. And I talk about a guy named Og, who's like a prehistoric person. And they're out hunting and his friend gets killed. He gets ripped open. His head's ripped open. His chest is ripped open. Og looks in there. He just sees a bunch of gooey stuff. He has no idea. But what he knows is that his friend has stopped breathing. And that night, Og sits around the campfire and he watches the smoke go up and disappear into the sky. And maybe he says, I know what happened. Whatever made my friend move and speak, it was invisible and it's gone up into the air.
Yes. Second
concept, my friend Jack Wathy, and I can't think of the title of his book right now, but I've got it. Well, I'll post it on Twitter. But
in the comments underneath this video when it becomes a podcast.
Yeah, so he's got a great book, and he says that when we're in the womb, we're hearing our mother's voice after a certain point, and that's making us feel better.
Yes.
Oh yeah, that's my mother. I mean, we're not thinking rationally like that, but so we spend months and months hearing that we don't see the mother. We're in this dark place. We hear this voice. We sense her beating heart. And he says that is something that predisposes us, makes us more easily able to say, yes, God is right here. God is with me. God is me. It's just a transference of that pre-birth experience.
It's projection, isn't it? And the trouble with that one is God should be a woman.
Yeah.
Anyway, we've done an hour and we're still going. Would you like to do your parable now? I'm sure lots of our audience, thank you for watching, you people, would like to hear your new way of thinking.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for letting me do this. About 5 minutes. I'm going to start off with a parable, and the title is Bad Glasses. Long, long ago, in a place far, far away, a strange practice took hold. And bear with me a minute. I've got to get this where I can see it and still look like I'm not looking somewhere else. So I'm going to start over. All right, I'm just going to do this.
Anything about an audience, they want to see your eyes looking at them.
Yeah. Okay, I think I've almost got it here. I had this all set up, but all right. Okay, I got it. Okay, starting over. Bad glasses.
Okay.
Long, long ago, in a place far, far away, a strange practice took hold when someone, no one knew who, developed special eyeglasses and began to convince large numbers of the inhabitants of this land that they could not see their world correctly or live life as it was meant to be lived without wearing these glasses all the time. Soon the glasses wearers were meeting weekly to extol the values of their lenses and to warn of the dangers of life without this special eyewear. They sang songs about their glasses and heard talks about how their spectacles helped them to clearly see things as they really are. They heard talks about how horrible life looked without the special glasses. They called the glasses and themselves brighteners. Theirs was a brightly colored world, populated with an endless array of amazing creatures and wonderful sights. And the people of this world, despite their finite frailties and flaws, were pretty amazing too. Unfortunately, the glasses worn by the brighteners created a view of their world that was the opposite of what was promised. The spectacles were slightly out of focus, cast a grayish tint on everything, and over time made the world look less inviting than it actually was. It wasn't long before the brighteners began to teach that life in their dim, gray-tinted glasses world was simply a prelude to another life in a much better place. They developed an elaborate set of beliefs about life after death. The leaders of the brighteners formulated rules about how to wear the glasses in just the right way, so one could be certain of attaining this life that would never end in a place far, far better than their world. Eventually, the brighteners began to argue among themselves and to split into rival groups. All still called themselves brighteners, but the groups engaged in fierce debates about just the right formula for grinding the lenses, just the right gray tint, which frames were and were not appropriate, and at what age children should start wearing the glasses. Some brighteners got glasses for their children almost immediately after they were born. Others thought it important to let their children reach an age at which they could make their own decision, albeit under tremendous pressure from family and friends, to start wearing the glasses. The brighteners were not, for the most part, bad individuals. In fact, their local groups, while hampered in some ways by the gray-shaded glasses they wore, did a lot to look out for one another. They visited those who were sick. They comforted members when a loved one died. And from time to time, they provided financial help to those who needed it. The glasses and the belief system tied to the glasses provided a sense of belonging, comfort, and hope for most of the brighteners, especially to those who were most committed. But some of the brighteners were more sincere in their belief than others. Some found glass grinders who would secretly replace their standard out-of-focus lenses with lenses that did not distort, and for some, a prescription that actually improved their vision. Their renegade glasses looked like the standard issue brighteners on the outside, so only they knew they were cheating. From the beginning, there were some individuals in this faraway land who refused to wear the glasses and made no secret of their non-belief. These faithless individuals confidently and accurately asserted they could actually see much better without the brightener glasses. These infidels were dubbed dimmers by the brighteners, and they were not treated well. They were shunned, ridiculed, and sometimes even killed for their lack of eye apparel. After hundreds of generations had passed in this faraway land, more and more individuals in more and more places began to take off their brightener glasses and declare themselves as dimmers. As their numbers grew, many dimmers stopped being quiet or ashamed of what they did not believe. Increasing numbers became proud to call themselves dimmers. They said that being a dimmer was the only way anyone could see clearly. Over time, the dimmers experienced their own kind of division. Some of the dimmers devoted themselves to telling everyone, "I don't wear the glasses, and you are foolish if you wear them." This simple pronouncement became their mission, and over time, defined them. Given all the damage the special glasses had done, one could see the value in their crusade against the brighteners, and their courage was admirable. But other dimmers experienced the "I don't wear glasses" emphasis as a stage, a step, a start. They eventually decided they did not like "I don't wear glasses" as their calling card. They wanted to be known less for what they did not believe and more for what they did value and appreciate. For them, The next step was talking about all the wonderful things they could see without the glasses. They focused on the goodness and brightness of life in their world, the possibilities, the colors, and the joy. They talked about finding freedom and clarity in the here and now. They focused on kindness, strength, respect, and love. And they decided that dimmers was not a very good description of who they really were. For me, the parable above is personal. I no longer believe in any personal, all-powerful, all-knowing God. But I am open to the possibility that there could be some impersonal force or being beyond our current understanding that had something to do with getting our existence started. This qualifies me as a Dawkins Level 6 atheist. I can also accurately call myself an agnostic, but not because I think a personal, all-powerful, all-knowing God might exist, or because I have more exploring to do before confidently declaring that such a God does not exist. For me, agnosticism simply means that it is not currently possible to know all there is to know about the potential existence of some now hidden prime mover. I left my Christian faith 14 years ago. I kept pretty quiet about it for 11 years until 2018, when I wrote and published Goodbye Jesus. Since then, I've written other books about non-belief, along with over 7,000 tweets and multiple online articles. I've been interviewed about my departure from faith on programs originating in the US, Canada, England, Australia, and India. I now have a strong sense that it's time for an adjustment in my focus. My unbelief in the God of any religion is as firm as ever. I'm not moving away from atheism or agnosticism, but I do want to move in a more positive direction. I'm like the dimmers who decided that's not how they wanted to be defined. You can call me an atheist or an agnostic if you like, but neither is my preferred adjective. I don't want to be known just for what I don't believe. I want to focus on positive contributions that help other people. I'm interested in inspiring, encouraging, and connecting. I want to keep learning and keep sharing what I learn. I want to laugh, and if I can, make others laugh now and then. I want to live in the present tense, learning from past experiences and preparing for the uncertainties of the future, but mainly living fully in the present moment, because that's when life happens, right now. This moment is life. My communications pathway for this new focus is movingtruths.com. I'll still post articles on my site, goodbyejesus.net, and I'll still tweet as Goodbye Jesus on Twitter, but likely less frequently. And so, John, I want to encourage everybody who's listening today to, you can go to movingtruths.com and click to subscribe, and you'll be notified about when I write a different article or different, I've got all kinds of resources there. I'm developing a line of secular greeting cards that you can buy on the site. Yeah. And it's a lot of nature photography, a lot of cool stuff that anybody, regardless of their religious belief or lack of it, I think, can identify with. So as you can tell from this parable and the follow-up comments that I read, this is a transition point for me. Yep. We've introduced it here on your show today.
Thank you.
And this article is now on Goodbye Jesus. If you go to goodbyejesus.net, you want to read the article, it's right there to read. Thanks for letting me share that, John.
Well, Tim, you're a wonderful guy and a kindred spirit. And I want to talk to you after we stop live streaming about a project that I'm doing that I'd like to put in front of you and hope you will consider joining in with. Anyway, as expected, you have been fantastic. The audience has been very engaged, and I'm sorry if you didn't get your question addressed, but there will be an opportunity to comment in the details underneath this video in a few minutes when it becomes a podcast. And maybe, Tim, you might join in with those comments too. And we'll definitely put links to your books and your websites. Tim, thank you very much.
Thank you, John. I enjoyed it. It was great.
Good, good. I did too. Next week, for the benefit of our audience, we have Tyrone Wells as the guest. He is a street epistemologist. He'll be interesting to talk to you. Thank you. Bye-bye.